All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into some pretty big news today. Nigeria's partnership with BRICS. It looks like a lot of you sent in some fascinating sources on this one. So let's see what we've got here and try to unpack whether this is a brilliant move for Nigeria or maybe a risky gamble.
Yeah, definitely a bold move. And you're spot on about the implications. This goes way beyond just the economics. We're talking potentially about a real shift in the global power dynamics, with Nigeria, the biggest economy in Africa, throwing its weight behind a group that's pretty openly challenging the way things have always been done on the world stage.
Right. And I think our listeners are pretty up to speed, but maybe for anyone who needs a quick refresher. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they started back in 2006, right as a group of up-and-coming economies, and they've been gaining more and more influence ever since. But this partner country thing they started in 2024, that's a whole new ballgame, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a pretty smart way for BRICS to kind of widen their network without the whole commitment of full membership. You could almost think of it like a trial run.
Mm.
Countries like Nigeria get a seat at the table. They get to be part of the discussions. They get to contribute to what BRICS is doing.
And it's not just Nigeria hopping on board either, right?
Yeah.
We saw 8 other countries, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Thailand, Uganda, Uzbekistan, all becoming partner countries this year too. It's like everyone's trying to figure out where they fit in with all this change happening globally.
Yeah, it's kind of like picking teams for some massive geopolitical game, and the stakes are pretty high. But with Nigeria, what's really interesting is they've always been pretty tight with the West historically, so this pivot towards BRICS is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, like they're playing both sides, hedging their bets in a world that's getting more and more, I guess you could say, multipolar.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, with big players like China and Russia in the mix, can Nigeria really carve out its own space within BRICS? Can they really make their voice heard?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Nigeria's got a lot to offer. Huge population, over 228 million tons of natural resources, and their tech sector is growing like crazy. But to make sure they don't get overshadowed, they got to be strategic and they got to be assertive.
So let's dig into some of the potential benefits. The sources talk about access to funding from the BRICS New Development Bank for infrastructure projects. I imagine that's a big draw for Nigeria, considering their needs in areas like transportation and energy.
Oh, absolutely. Think of the possibilities: renewable energy projects to help with their energy shortages, better transportation to boost trade, investment in digital infrastructure to support that tech scene that's exploding. It could be huge for a developing economy.
And wouldn't this funding actually line up perfectly with some of the economic reforms they've been making recently in Nigeria? Things like opening up their foreign exchange market and getting rid of fuel subsidies.
That's a really smart move on their part. By making things more attractive to investors, they're signaling to BRICS that they're serious about growth and stability. It's like they're laying the foundation for a partnership that benefits everyone.
But let's be real. Nigeria's had its issues with corruption. How can we be sure that this money is going to be used the right way, transparently? Just throwing money at problems doesn't always solve them right.
That's a fair point. It's a valid concern, and it's something Nigeria is going to have to address head on. The whole success of this partnership really hinges on good governance and accountability.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about getting the money. It's about having the right systems in place to manage it right and make sure it translates to real improvements for the Nigerian people.
Exactly. And that brings us to another potential upside: working together on global issues like climate change and food security. Nigeria's got a lot to contribute in those areas, especially when it comes to sustainable agriculture and protecting biodiversity.
That seems like a place where Nigeria could really stand out within BRICS. They could show off their knowledge and take a leadership role on things that are vital for the whole planet.
Absolutely. And don't forget the economic boost. New markets for Nigerian exports, especially things like agricultural products, tech, manufactured goods.
Speaking of manufacturing, the sources mentioned import substitution as a key strategy for Nigeria. Can you unpack that a bit? What industries are we talking about benefiting from this, and what kind of challenges might they face?
Sure, import substitution's basically about relying less on stuff from other countries and making more of it domestically. For Nigeria, this could be about developing their manufacturing in areas where they've already got an edge. Things like textiles, food processing, pharmaceuticals.
So instead of bringing in those finished goods from elsewhere, they'd be creating jobs and boosting their own economy by producing them right there at home. Makes sense.
It's a classic development strategy, but it doesn't come without challenges. Nigeria would need to invest heavily in infrastructure, tech, and skills development to make sure their industries can compete on a global level. They've got to deal with issues like protectionism and make sure domestic producers have a fair shot.
Sounds like a tricky balancing act. Strategic planning, smart investments, a long-term vision. But if they get it right, the payoff could be massive.
For sure, it could shift Nigeria from being mainly a resource exporter to a hub of innovation and manufacturing, creating jobs and driving economic growth.
But alongside these exciting opportunities, we can't ignore the potential downsides. Getting closer to BRICS might mean becoming too reliant on China or Russia. That could risk their relationship with the West. How do you see this playing out?
That's a valid concern, and it's a tightrope walk for Nigeria. They've got to be careful not to become too dependent on any single partner, whether it's China, Russia, or even the U.S.
So it's all about diversification, keeping things balanced, and playing the field strategically to protect their own interests.
Exactly. It's about using their partnerships, both old and new, to push their own development agenda and secure their place on the world stage.
Which brings us to another crucial point. The challenges within Nigeria itself. They're dealing with things like corruption, security issues, and not enough infrastructure. How can they tackle those things while also navigating this whole complex geopolitical situation?
That's probably their biggest hurdle. They can't afford to ignore those internal problems while they're busy building relationships on the world stage. Actually fixing those issues is essential if they really want to benefit from this BRICS opportunity.
So it's not a case of either. It's about going after both internal and external goals at the same time, understanding that they're connected and they actually reinforce each other.
Exactly. Making their own house stronger is going to boost their standing within BRICS, and using that BRICS partnership can actually help support their development efforts back home. It's a two-way street.
So it sounds like Nigeria is at a real crossroads here. Amazing opportunities and some pretty daunting challenges all at the same time. The choices they make in the next few months, even years, are going to have a huge impact not just on them, but maybe on the balance of power globally.
And that's why this deep dive is so crucial, right? It's about understanding the nuances, weighing the pros and cons, and realizing there are no easy answers. It's a complex and fascinating story that's just starting to unfold.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're watching a key moment, not just for Nigeria, but for the whole world. And speaking of that bigger picture, you said earlier that Nigeria joining BRICS is a huge sign of the global South trying to make its mark on the world stage. What does that actually mean? What are the implications?
Well, for decades, the global order has been pretty much shaped by Western powers, right? But we're seeing a change now. Countries in the global South, Africa, Latin America, Asia, they're starting to team up to challenge that dominance.
It's like they're realizing, hey, we've got power too, economic and political, and they're demanding a place at the table where the rules are being made.
Exactly. And BRICS is a perfect example of that. It's a platform for these countries to coordinate, to make their voices louder, to push for changes in global governance, trade, finance, climate change, all that stuff. They want to create a world that's fairer and where power is more spread out.
In Nigeria, with its size and influence in Africa, it's a big win for BRICS in this effort, right?
Absolutely. Them being there strengthens BRICS' position in Africa. It sends a message to other countries that are maybe thinking about joining. We're seeing countries like Algeria sort of testing the waters. They joined the BRICS New Development Bank, but they haven't fully committed to being a partner yet.
Yeah, like they're dipping their toes in watching what happens with Nigeria to see how it goes. And then there are others like Turkey and Vietnam who are still on the fence, weighing the pros and cons.
It's high-stakes global diplomacy. Every country's trying to figure out their best move. And what happens with Nigeria will definitely influence their decisions.
So Nigeria is kind of a trailblazer, a test case for this new way of engaging with the world.
Exactly. And the whole world's watching. If Nigeria can make this partnership work, if they use their strengths and avoid the risks, it could encourage others to follow their lead. But if they stumble, it could send a wave of caution through the whole global South.
So the stakes are huge,
Mm-hmm.
not just for Nigeria, but for the whole future of global alliances and how power is balanced in the world.
And that brings us to the heart of it all. Why should you, our listener, care about this? Why should you care about something happening on the other side of the world?
That's the question, isn't it? Because, let's be real, the world's more connected than ever. What happens in Nigeria or in BRICS or anywhere really can have ripple effects that reach all of us.
Exactly. Think about it: global trade, security, technology, even the fight against climate change. It's all influenced by how global power is shifting. These aren't just isolated events. They're all connected pieces of a much bigger puzzle.
So understanding these global developments, even the ones that seem far away, is crucial for navigating this world that just keeps getting more complex.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, and realizing how these events that seem distant can actually shape our lives in big ways.
It's about being informed citizens of the world, having the knowledge to make good decisions and understand the forces that are shaping our future.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive, give you the context, the insights, the different points of view to help you make sense of this complicated and ever-changing story.
We've looked at the potential benefits and the challenges for Nigeria, what it means for BRICS, and the wider impact on the global stage.
But like any complicated issue, there are no easy answers. We've given you the facts, the analysis, the different perspectives. Now it's your turn, our listener, to draw your own conclusions.
And that brings us to our final thought-provoking question for you to think about. What do you think this means for the future balance of power in the world?
Will it lead to a world that's fairer and where power is more spread out like BRICS wants to see? A world where the global south has a bigger voice? Or will it create new tensions and challenges, maybe even more instability?
We've given you the tools. Now it's your turn to analyze, to think critically, and to form your own informed opinions. It's amazing to think just one partnership could completely change how the world works. It really shows how much things are changing. Old alliances being tested and new ones forming.
And this is where it gets really interesting because we just don't know how it's going to turn out. Will this be a big win for both Nigeria and BRICS, or will things go wrong that no one saw coming? Will other countries see what Nigeria is doing and follow their lead, or will they play it safe?
It's like watching a giant game of chess, but played out across the whole world, each move affecting everything.
That's why it's so important to stay informed and pay attention. It's not enough to just read the headlines. You got to understand the bigger picture, what's motivating everyone, and what these global shifts could really mean.
Yeah, it's about developing that ability to think critically, analyze the information, connect the dots, and form our own opinions based on facts.
Because with all the information out there, it's easy to get lost in the noise, all the hype, and the conflicting stories. But if we take a deeper look, examine all the different sides, we can navigate this complex world with a lot more clarity and understanding.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nigeria's partnership with BRICS, we want to leave you thinking about the huge possibilities and the potential risks that are out there.
We've given you a way to understand this complicated issue, but your real journey starts now.
Keep researching, keep asking questions, explore different viewpoints, and come to your own conclusions.
Because the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make as individuals and together as a global community. And by staying informed, by having thoughtful discussions, and by accepting that our world is complex and interconnected, we can all play a part in shaping a future that's fairer, more sustainable, and more prosperous for everyone.
Keep diving deep.
Until next time.